After a stretch of frustration inside the division, the Ravens finally delivered a performance that felt like a release of everything that had been building over the past few weeks. Coming off the painful losses in the AFC North, Baltimore walked into a hostile environment, knowing exactly what was at stake, not just in the standings, but in terms of identity. This was not simply about getting back in the win column. It was about re-establishing who they are when things turn physical, emotional, and uncomfortable. From the moment the game settled into its rhythm, it became clear that Baltimore was intent on imposing itself, not with finesse or flash, but with intensity, force, and an edge that Cincinnati struggled to match once the tide turned. Early on, the game looked messy and uneven, with both teams trading mistakes and missed opportunities. It was the kind of football that tests patience and discipline, where momentum feels fragile and every snap carries extra weight. But midway through the second quarter, something shifted. Baltimore began to play faster, hit harder, and communicate better on defense. And that energy started to seep into every part of the game. The Ravens were no longer reacting. They were dictating. Cincinnati, on the other hand, began to look rattled, and that contrast only grew sharper as the game progressed. One of the clearest symbols of that edge was Draymond Jones, whose presence was felt even when it did not show up loudly on the stat sheet. He played with visible fire, crashing into the pocket, pressuring the quarterback, and letting the opposing offense know that every drop back would come with a cost. A hit on Joe Burrow sparked a reaction, emotions flared, and suddenly the game had that raw, confrontational feel that often defines AFC North battles. Jones did not shy away from it. Instead, he leaned into the moment, embracing the intensity and sending a clear message that Baltimore was not interested in backing down. That emotional exchange became a turning point in how the game felt. Cincinnati appeared distracted, more focused on responding than executing. Flags were avoided, but tempers simmered, and the Bengals seemed to let frustration creep into their play. Baltimore, by contrast, stayed connected. The defense fed off one another, celebrating stops, communicating between plays, and playing as a single unit. That cohesion mattered, especially in a game where neither offense found early rhythm. When opportunities arose, the Ravens were the team ready to seize them. What stood out most was the sense that Baltimore wanted this game more, even though both teams understood the stakes. It was the Ravens who played with urgency from snap to snap once they found their footing. Cincinnati faced the reality that a loss would effectively end their season. Yet it was Baltimore that looked desperate, hungry, and relentless. The Ravens played as if they had something to prove, as if the narrative of inconsistency and missed chances had finally reached a breaking point. They were done letting games slip away. Defensively, Baltimore showed exactly what this unit is capable of when it plays with confidence. The pass rush did not rely on one highlight sack, but instead wore the quarterback down through constant pressure. Joe Burrow was forced to speed up his internal clock, throw the ball away, and absorb hits that added up over the course of the afternoon. Even when plays did not end in tackles for loss, they disrupted timing and rhythm, which is often just as valuable. Coverage tightened, passing lanes closed, and Cincinnati struggled to string together anything sustained. There was also a noticeable physicality at the line of scrimmage that favored Baltimore. Each snap felt like a small battle, and the Ravens consistently won more of them as the game wore on. That cumulative effect mattered, especially in cold conditions where energy and toughness become defining factors. Cincinnati began to look flat, almost resigned at times, while Baltimore looked energized, feeding off every defensive stop and every sign of frustration from the other sideline. Moments like a dropped pass, a mistimed route, or a sack that pushed the Bengals out of scoring range did more than stall drives. They chipped away at confidence. Momentum, which early on bounced awkwardly between both teams, slowly tilted in one direction. Baltimore did not even need immediate offensive fireworks to benefit. Simply denying Cincinnati points, possession after possession, allowed the Ravens to tighten their grip on the game. It became clear that if Baltimore could keep pressing, the Bengals might not have an answer. This is where the Ravens' identity began to reemerge. For much of the season, there were stretches where the team looked disconnected or emotionally flat. Even in wins, this time, the energy felt different. Teammates lifted each other after plays. The sideline stayed engaged. There was purpose behind the aggression, not recklessness. Playing with an edge did not mean losing control. It meant playing fast, physical, and together, without letting emotions cross the line into mistakes. Draymond Jones embodied that balance. He talked, he gestured, he played with visible intensity. But he stayed within the rules and focused on the larger goal. His impact went far beyond tackles. Repeated quarterback hits forced hurried decisions and uncomfortable throws. And by the later stages of the game, it was evident that his presence had altered how Cincinnati approached passing situations. Even without flashy numbers, his influence was undeniable. The Ravens' defense also faced a major challenge. In terms of time of possession, they spent an extended amount of time on the field. Yet they did not break. Instead, they bent when necessary and then stiffened in critical moments. Giving up minimal yardage per play against a talented offense speaks volumes about preparation, discipline, and resilience. Fatigue never became an excuse. Effort never dipped as the game unfolded. The contrast between the two teams became impossible to ignore. Baltimore looked like a group rediscovering its backbone, while Cincinnati looked like a team running out of answers. The Ravens did not simply survive this matchup, they controlled it emotionally and physically, reclaiming a version of themselves that had been missing, and with that foundation reestablished, everything else began to fall into place, setting the stage for what this performance could mean moving forward. As the second half unfolded, the separation between these two teams only became more pronounced. Not necessarily on the scoreboard right away, but in the way each side carried itself. Baltimore continued to play with purpose, while Cincinnati seemed to drift further into frustration. Every defensive stop by the Ravens felt heavier, almost deflating for the Bengals, because it reinforced the reality that nothing was coming easy. The Ravens were not just reacting to mistakes, they were forcing them, and that distinction changed the entire feel of the game. One of the most impressive aspects of this performance was how Baltimore managed the flow of momentum. Even when the offense stalled or a play did not go as planned, there was no visible panic. The defense stepped right back onto the field with confidence, trusting that it could once again shut the door. That trust matters, especially in a divisional matchup where familiarity often breeds chaos. Instead of letting the game spiral, the Ravens stabilized it through physicality and discipline, keeping Cincinnati stuck in neutral. Joe Burrow, usually so composed and efficient, spent much of the afternoon searching for comfort that never arrived. The pocket collapsed faster than he wanted, throwing lanes disappeared, and receivers struggled to gain clean separation. Each hit, each hurry, added another layer of discomfort. By the fourth quarter, it was clear that the cumulative effect of constant pressure had taken its toll. This was not about one big play, it was about relentless execution, snap after snap, wearing down one of the league's most dangerous quarterbacks. What made this defensive showing even more remarkable was the context. Baltimore spent a significant portion of the game defending, yet the unit never lost its edge. Communication stayed sharp, tackling remained firm, assignments were executed with precision. Holding an offense with this level of talent to 0 points requires more than talent. It demands focus and belief, especially when fatigue sets in. The Ravens showed both, and that speaks to the character of this group. There was also a noticeable difference in how each team handled adversity. When Cincinnati faced setbacks, the response felt emotional and scattered. When Baltimore encountered challenges, the response was controlled and collective. That contrast reflected more than just this one game. It hinted at deeper organizational habits, the kind that show up most clearly in high-pressure moments. Baltimore played like a team that understood exactly who it was and what it needed to do to win this kind of game. The physical tone never softened. Every tackle, every collision carried intention. The Ravens were not simply trying to stop plays, they were trying to impose discomfort, to make each yard earned feel exhausting. That approach is mentally draining for an offense, especially when drives end without points. Over time, it changes decision-making. It forces quarterbacks to rush reads and receivers to press. That is exactly what unfolded as the game wore on. Even moments after the final whistle reflected the intensity of the afternoon. There was respect between competitors, but also honesty. The message was clear. Baltimore earned this result by outworking and outlasting its opponent. There was no fluke, no single play to point to. It was dominance built through effort, cohesion, and a refusal to let the game slip away. Stat lines alone do not tell the story of this performance. Some of the most impactful players did their damage in ways that do not always grab headlines. Quarterback pressures, disciplined coverage, gap control, and energy on the sideline all contributed to a defensive masterpiece. The Ravens proved that impact is not always measured in sacks or turnovers. but in how uncomfortable you make the opposing offense feel for an entire afternoon. This game also served as a reminder of what Baltimore football looks like at its best. It is physical. It is emotional, but controlled. It thrives on momentum and feeds off adversity. For much of the season, that identity felt inconsistent, sometimes buried beneath mistakes and missed opportunities. In this matchup, it resurfaced in full force. The Ravens did not just beat a divisional rival. They reminded everyone, including themselves, of the standard they expect to meet. Cincinnati, on the other hand, struggled to match that standard once the game tilted against them. Missed chances early turned into frustration later, and frustration eventually gave way to resignation. In a league where mental toughness is often the difference, Baltimore clearly held the advantage. The Ravens sensed vulnerability and did not hesitate. They pressed harder, closed tighter, and refused to allow any opening. By the time the final minutes ticked away, the outcome felt inevitable. Baltimore had already won the most important battles long before the clock expired. They won the battle of will, the battle of physicality, and the battle of composure. Those victories do not always show up immediately on the scoreboard, but they define games like this. More than anything, this performance felt like a turning point. Not because of standings or scenarios, but because of how the Ravens carried themselves from start to finish. This was a team that played with conviction, with hunger, and with unity. The kind of performance that can reshape confidence and reset expectations inside a locker room. And as the season continues, that rediscovered edge could become the foundation for everything that comes next. That kind of performance also reshapes how opponents prepare moving forward. When a defense proves it can shut down a high-powered offense without relying on turnovers or fluky plays, it forces future teams to rethink their approach. You cannot simply wait for Baltimore to make mistakes. You have to earn everything, snap by snap, hit by hit. That reality changes play calling, alters game plans, and increases pressure before the ball is even kicked off. Teams know they will be tested, physically and mentally, and not everyone is built for that kind of game. Inside the locker room, games like this tend to tighten bonds. Players trust each other more when they see preparation translate directly to results. Especially in adverse conditions, defensive units feed off shared success, and that confidence spills over into practices, meetings, and weekly routines. It becomes easier to demand accountability when everyone has proof of what happens when standards are met. Leaders do not have to speak as loudly when the tape says everything for them. There is also a quiet belief that grows when a team wins this way, not the loud, reckless confidence that fades after a bad quarter, but the steady kind that shows up late in games and late in seasons. Baltimore showed it can absorb punches, wait for openings, and then take control without panic. That trait matters when games tighten, when weather worsens, and when stakes rise. Performances like this do not guarantee anything, but they lay the groundwork for what comes next, shaping how this team carries itself as the pressure continues to build. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. Rumors are swirling across the NFL landscape as insiders suggest a dramatic shakeup could be underway in the AFC North. Sources close to ESPN are hinting that a recent league ruling has put the Pittsburgh Steelers in hot water, with potential ramifications that could ripple through the division. According to the whispers making the rounds, the Steelers are facing a punitive action that might affect their standing, opening the door for the Baltimore Ravens to ascend to the top spot. While details remain murky, league watchers are buzzing about the severity of the punishment. Could it be a fine, a draft pick adjustment, or something more impactful that could shift the balance of power? In one of football's most competitive divisions, analysts on social media and sports talk radio are dissecting every possibility, fueling speculation among fans and insiders alike. The Ravens, who have quietly built a formidable team with a mix of seasoned veterans and emerging talent, are reportedly poised to take advantage if the Steelers stumble. Sources close to the organization suggest that confidence is running high. Even if the team is keeping its cards close to the chest, the murmurs hint that Baltimore could capitalize on any opportunity, making strategic moves that not only maintain momentum, but potentially solidify their leadership in the division. In Pittsburgh, the atmosphere is reportedly tense. Team officials and coaching staff are said to be navigating a mix of frustration and urgency. While fans are left wondering what this could mean for the season ahead, the Steelers have long been considered a powerhouse. But even the most storied franchises can find themselves in precarious situations when league penalties come into play. Meanwhile, social media is ablaze with speculation, memes, and heated debates about how far the Ravens might rise if the rumors prove true, as the NFL world holds its collective breath. One thing is certain, the AFC North is suddenly a hotbed of intrigue. From whispered strategy sessions to analyst hot takes, the potential for a seismic shift in the division is the talk of every sports forum and bar across the country. Whether this will mark the beginning of a Ravens resurgence or a temporary shakeup remains to be seen, but one thing is undeniable: the drama is far from over. Fans are watching closely, knowing that in the NFL, a single ruling can change everything overnight. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.